here's Ed Bernstein.
Good afternoon. Hey, with me today is County Commissioner Steve Sisolak, and a little bit later on in the show, Justice of the Peace, Joe Bonaventure will be here. Commissioner, you know, I think the big news everybody seems to be talking about in the county right now is the situation with our stadium, our sports teams, the T-Mobile Arena. Right. You know, the arena went up. It was, you know, a great opening. You know, people, it really got built in record time.
It did.
My observation, right?
It was great. In less than 2 years.
Yeah, and now recently in the paper there's a front page story about stadium and the Oakland Raiders. So what is the chances of that happening?
I think there's a realistic chance of an NFL franchise coming here. You know, you've always got to be careful that the NFL is not you're getting played against Oakland, you know, or LA and something along these lines. I don't want to believe that's happening. I've met with some of the folks on the football team side, and they're convinced that the NFL is receptive to moving a team to Las Vegas, and it's one of those chicken egg things. You have a stadium and then you attract the team, or how do you build a stadium if you don't have a team and commit those kind of resources? So hopefully we're going to be able to work out those issues, and I think that an awful lot of community people want to be a big league town, and with the potential of hockey coming in a year or so, and NFL maybe being a little bit further down the road, it's an exciting time.
I think people do want it, but what I'm also hearing is people don't want to pay for it.
That's case with an awful lot of things.
Yeah.
People want it, but they don't want to pay for it. You're right.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to pay for it.
Yeah.
No, it's an unusual situation. We just did have the opening of the T-Mobile Arena, and MGM built that with all private money. Did an absolutely incredible job. It's a beautiful facility. It's just state of the art, and it's half entertainment complex, half arena. If you've been in a lot of different arenas, this is much more entertainment than others might have been. Other arenas might be. We don't have a professional team in there yet. There's a hope that we'll get a professional team in there with hockey in the foreseeable future, but that they built based on they don't need the hockey franchise in order to make that successful. Whether that's the case with an NFL stadium is another story. The arena was, you know, 400 million-ish range, I think, and the stadium you're looking at 1.2 billion. I mean, it's a big, big number to build a dome stadium, and where you'd put it is another situation that we have to deal with. But there's not an awful lot of events that fill up a stadium. I mean, concerts or fights, that sort of thing. It's got to be a mega event to fill a stadium. But those are things we have to see how realistic it is to bring a team here.
And it's getting much more competitive with the Riviera. They're tearing down the Riviera and putting an extension in the convention center, the Sands Convention Center. I mean, everybody seems to be competing.
Well, everybody is competing, but what's happened is that, you know, we get an awful lot of visitors here on Friday, Saturday, Sundays. You know, the weekend visitors that come here for vacation, a mini vacation, that type of thing, and have a great time. And it's not just what it used to be in terms of gaming. It's now an entire experience. You come here for the shows, you come here for the shopping, the dining, the entertainment that goes with it. During the week, we count on conventions to bring, you know, the room occupancy up. There's a lot of rooms. It's the old story, the LVCV has to put heads in the beds, and we got to fill up an awful lot of beds with people, and the only way you can do that effectively and efficiently on a long-term basis is to have folks come for a convention. They come in on Sunday night or Monday, and the conventions are usually over on Thursday or Friday, and then they're out, and we get the regular tourists coming over the weekend. So there's 100,000 rooms you got to fill with people, so you got to have a significant number of conventions. Now there's a lot of meeting spaces in some of the various properties, and a lot of the properties have built or are building convention space, but it's competitive. It's very, very competitive, but there's such an enormous demand, and we don't want to fall behind. There's a lot of other cities, Orlando in particular, that is ahead of us in terms of infrastructure. No other city has what Las Vegas has, the charisma, the amenities and whatnot, you know, this number of rooms in this close proximity. But we don't want to lose our edge and definitely want to stay out front on that.
It was my belief years ago that the reason we didn't have professional teams was because we had legalized gambling, and there was, you know, I don't know if there was illegality in the state law with betting on local teams, or whether the professional franchises just thought, hey, if we come to Las Vegas, it's not going to look good for us to be in a gambling town, or it's going to hurt the legal sports betting industry. Is that really an issue?
I think that's kind of gone away a lot. I remember way back when you couldn't bet. You could bet on college basketball, but you couldn't bet on UNLV.
Right.
And you remember that time that was here. Now I think that we've kind of gotten away from that. If anything has cleaned up sports, I think it is the legal gaming, because that they see the money come in on different side of a game or whatnot, and they can see if there's some impropriety potentially going on behind the scenes. And with the advent of these fantasy teams and those issues which is still legally going to be worked out, what's going to be legal, what's a lottery, and what's not a lottery. More and more people are interested in it, and I think that's what's helped the popularity of some of these professional sports is the fantasy leagues that have started and gives people a reason to watch football on Sunday and basketball and whatnot. I think that the leagues have gotten by that. I think they've gotten by that. They realize that Las Vegas is a great market. It could definitely bring some more tourists here, but professional sports franchises have gotten really, really expensive. I mean, you're in the billions now, high hundreds of millions or low billions in order to get one here. So it's a significant investment, and whether that'll happen, no doubt in my mind it'll happen. Whether it happens now or it happens in 5 or 10 years is another story.
The day that the arena opened, the Killers had opened it, and that afternoon I had a meeting over at the Monte Carlo. So I pulled into the area, went into Monte Carlo to go park, to go meet a client that had just gotten into town, and stopped there. The valet valet guy said, it's $30 to park here. I said, whoa, I went over and I self-parked. But do you feel, is that going to be a problem? Is that going to be a trend? Are the other casinos going to follow suit?
I think it's going to depend. MGM again here is on the cutting edge, or out front, determining whether or not this is going to work. Now, I went to the grand opening that night for the Killers and didn't stay for much of the concert because it was late for me and I have to work the next day. But we paid to go into the garage. And it was easily accessible off Frank Sinatra Drive. I mean, you drove right up the ramp, and then when you left, you drove right back out. It dumped the cars on the Tropicana, and it was fine. Now, a lot of people that I met parked at the MGM, or they parked at Aria and walked, and they weren't charging there, so they didn't have to pay the parking fee. As MGM implements this at more and more of the properties, I don't know how people react to it. I totally understand what they're saying. You're looking at property on the Strip that's upwards of, $6, $8, $10 million an acre. It's tough to use that for free parking. And people are using the parking, and they're not even going to those properties. They're parking at the MGM, and they're going to the Tropicana. They're parking at the MGM, and they're walking somewhere else. And that's one of the issues that comes up. And even when you're building these parking garages now, people don't realize the cost of these. You're upwards of $20,000 per space to build a parking garage. So it's an awful lot of expense and capital investment, and they feel that they have to recoup that somehow. Now, we're spoiled a little bit here, because as well as I do, you go to New York, you go to San Diego or LA, you pay to park your car when you go to a hotel. New York, you're lucky if you can even pay, if it's not, and the rates are incredible. So I think the jury's out on that. I know there was a lot of pushback, but MGM did their homework, and they did some parking analysis, and we'll see how it works out in the long run.
Of course, I think we're trying to hopefully discourage people from driving to these events, because the traffic is just a mess over around the Strip, and we've talked about all kinds of transportation issues up and down the Strip, and now with Uber and Lyft operating. By the way, is that operating smoothly? Is that all reconciled?
Well, whether or not it's smoothly, I guess you'd have to go to both sides. They'd both like to say, I think, some changes, tweaking in it. They're both operating together. Now how agreeable it is, right now it's working. I'm sure that's going to be an issue that's going to be addressed at the legislature, because around the country there's been some issues as it relates to Uber and Lyft, some of the ride-sharing companies, but we'll wait and see what the legislature determines.
So where do you see the Strip in 10 years, traffic-wise?
Well, I think we need to do something. I think some of the ideas that have come up with that, the RTC with tunnels and overhead bridges and down the middle, I don't think they're really realistic, quite frankly. When you're putting price tags of $10 and $20 billion on some of this infrastructure, we simply can't afford something along those lines. I think there's some more immediate things that could be done that I wish they would do. I think you could make the right-hand lane on both sides more of a bus lane and add more buses up and down Las Vegas Boulevard. It's a fun place. People particularly like those double-decker buses because you get a good view. And I know some people take it for that 4-mile stretch just to see everything. And they make the loop a couple times because the architecture is amazing in what you see there. And pedestrians do like to get out and walk because we have nice weather here. I don't see anything underground. I just don't see that being realistic. As we get more and more people coming to town, there are more cars, and that's one thing that happened with Uber and Lyft, the rideshare companies that put more vehicles on the Strip to pick people up. So In the meantime, we're going to continue. I think it's part of it's kind of like Times Square. There's a traffic problem there, and I don't know how you fix that long term.
In the national news right now, the talk is all about the caucuses around the country. In Nevada, we had really, a very newsworthy caucus here recently. We had one in '08 as well, between Hillary and Obama. Now we have the Republican ones getting a lot of, as well, both sides are getting a lot of attention in Nevada. It's very confusing because we do have as well a real primary in Nevada for state and local offices. People understand that when you go in a primary, you vote whatever candidate, whoever gets the most votes, who gets the nomination, it goes on to the general. Why isn't it like that when we elect a president?
That is a great question, Ed, and I wish it was that way. I wish it were that way. I mean, it's unfortunate. I know a lot of people participated in the caucus this time that had never done it before, and they were really disenchanted with the process. I mean, I happened to go at Durango High School, and we had, I hope the fire marshal's not listening, but we had 80 people or 90 people in a room that was supposed to hold 30. I mean, it was just jammed in there like sardines, and people were loud in terms of voicing their opinions on who they liked in lobbying and so forth. And it took a long time as opposed to just going in a primary, casting your vote, and leaving. And it put people, I've got the complaint that it put people in an uncomfortable position. You go cast your vote in a primary, and when you're doing it as regular vote, nobody knows who's voting for whom. But in a caucus, you're sitting next door to your neighbor or the person down the block, and they know who you are. And it's like later they're saying, why did you support her? Or why did you support him? And what's the matter with you? And I think people would have preferred a little more anonymity as it related to who they supported.
It's almost the opposite of voting. I mean, the whole thing about voting and having a seat in a ballot and doing it in private is almost the opposite.
It almost is the opposite. And it did cause some discussion to linger and to go on for weeks after the caucuses. And I've still had people come to me and say, I would like to not have my neighbor know who I was supporting, because people make their own decisions based on whatever their criteria are. And I would prefer personally a primary.
Is that up to the parties, or is that up to the state legislature?
The legislature. The legislature had a chance to go to a primary, and they decided not to. They went to the caucus system, and I think that they realized this time it might be better done the other way.
Maybe time to change.
Maybe time to change,
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago we were having some tension between Metro and the county over dollars. I mean, it always seems that the tension's always over money, right? Metro cut back on the police. They wanted more police. They finally did get more police on the streets.
We did. We absolutely increased the sales tax by 0.05, 5 cents, and that helped. It's going to get some more officers out there. You're not seeing the full effect of it yet, because it takes about 18 months, is what Sheriff Lombardo told me, from the day you hire someone to put them in the academy to you put them loose in a car by themselves when they can be out on patrol. So we're just getting those classes coming through the academy now. I'm going to put some more officers out there, which is a good thing. And the sheriff has changed his priorities around, and I agree to support that because they started responding to car accidents again. And it was very important, because he had a lot of, particularly in my district, the senior citizens felt intimidated when they had a small accident, and they, some young folks got out of the car in front of them and they felt, geez, I'm afraid. What do I? So it was good to have almost, if it was a peacemaker or whatever, Metro there to respond to them, and I think that was worth it.
Yeah, that's an important part. And also, Metro makes a lot of arrests based upon these kind of traffic stops and accidents.
Yeah.
That's, find warrants and...
Sure, you find those sort of things that you wouldn't have known about had that not been the case, but for the fact of the traffic accident, and that's a good thing. It's a check and balance. So hopefully that'll continue, and we'll have continued improvement with Metro, but they're doing what they can with the budget. Every time we get to this budget time that we're in right now, every department wants more, whether it's Metro, it's the judicial system, it's family services, it's whatever it might be, the hospital, the demands for money, because we've gone through a tough recession, and the departments have been really good in terms of trying to minimize the request, but it's tough when you feel like you've got 5 or 6 kids and you've only got one sandwich, and what do? I mean, so we're trying to cut it into small pieces, give everybody at least a bite.
Is that the most difficult part of your job, is cutting up the sandwich?
That is. It really is, because in fairness, whether it's the judicial system comes to us, they feel totally justified and they need every dollar that they're asking us for, or family service does the same thing, and they feel very strongly about that. But you don't have every dollar to give to them, and when you have to make that choice in terms of this one gets funded to the exception of another one not getting funded, those are hard decisions, and you hope you make the right one, and you make a lot of people unhappy, and You don't make very many happy, but we try to do the best we can with our limited resources.
Well, sounds great.
It's a pleasure, Ed.
Yeah, thank you. County Commissioner Steve Sisolak. We'll be right back with Judge Joe Bonaventure.